Today marks 52 weeks until the 2024 presidential election. The economy, always an important issue. And to get a read on what some voters are thinking ahead of that, we released a CNBC Generation Lab poll today called Money and Youth in the USA. It measures the opinions of 18 to 34-year-olds on the economy. And the results show widespread anxiety about their future well-being. Half surveyed said inflation is having a very negative impact on their finances. Mortgage prices and health care costs are also weighing on young voters. What does this tell us about the next election and the policy themes that will emerge going into that? Larry Sabato is a professor at the University of Virginia and director of the University Center for Politics. It's great to see you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on Power Lunch.
Thank you so much.
It's maybe early and maybe it's not, because I mean, how far are we from the first? We're just like a couple months, and this whole election cycle is going to be in really high gear. And what do you think the main drivers are going to be in terms of where voters are going to lay their bets?
Well, it's a year away, essentially. I suppose voting starts some places in September, but nonetheless, the economy, Biden must hope, should improve. And if it does, Democratic chances will improve. If it doesn't, then Republican chances will be pretty good. Of course, that will partly depend on who's the Republican nominee.
But the perceptions of the economy and the reality of the economy don't seem to be aligning. I mean, there's very strong GDP growth in the U.S. economy right now. Inflation has fallen a lot, and yet the perception is that the economy is stalled, that inflation, while it is still higher than obviously the Fed would like, that inflation is still a nagging concern here.
Well, that's all true. But the studies on how voters interpret the economy have stressed for many years that inflation is usually the number one concern. It's not the only concern, but the average person doesn't relate to the GDP. The average person has a job. Most people in their family have a job. So the unemployment rate is less important than the particulars that you all have focused on, like mortgage rates and the cost of health care, and what they see in the price of goods and services when they go to the store or get their car repaired. That's where the economy is failing younger people and middle-class people who don't have a lot of extra cash.
Yeah, the young people certainly express that with respect to inflation, as one might expect. They are the people who are just beginning their careers and may not have the kind of cushions. I want to turn to a study that you at the Center for Politics put together. It is a poll, and some of the findings in it absolutely floored me. Among them, that a staggering majority of both Biden and Trump supporters believe that electing officials from the opposite party would result in lasting harm to the United States. About 2 in 5 of Trump supporters and 1 in 3 Biden supporters expressed the idea that seceding from the U.S. was a reasonable approach to take, and that democracy, while they favored it, a third of Trump supporters and a quarter of Biden supporters somewhat agree that democracy is no longer viable.
Yeah, it upset us too. I can guarantee you, secession in particular, but violence of any sort in our system, while we have always had some, and it's true, we've had points in American history like the Civil War when it took over the system. But by and large, our disagreements have been peaceful. And we're seeing the two sides polarize, going to the ends of the spectrum, drifting apart, and willing to consider these horrible alternatives. And it's a warning to us to lower our voices, to do something about our rhetoric, that is, use a milder word instead of a stronger word. And a lot of this is up to the candidates. They have to lead the way. And if you have a candidate as party nominee who's using extreme language and is heating people up rather than cooling people down, we've got an even bigger problem ahead.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see the partisan divide and at the same time know that a lot of Obama voters, not a lot, but there were Obama voters who voted for Trump, who then voted for Biden. I mean, we still get these swing voters in every election, and we'll see this time around as well. I'm just, Larry, thinking through a little bit of the investment implications here, and I think the bond market has really thrust itself onto the main stage. You know, no one's going to run on a campaign of cutting entitlements, but what shape will that narrative or discussion take in maybe the 1 to 5 years to come, do you think?
Well, you hope it's on the table for discussion. Whenever it is, parties tend to use it simply to score political points instead of to deal with the problem. You know, that's one problem that never seems to get solved. Immigration is another, because the parties would rather have it as an issue than to solve it and take it off the table. And, you know, I always hope, and my hope is forlorn, but I always hope that a second-term president will decide to devote the term to long-term problems and will bring other people on board, at least a portion of the other party. Still waiting, but still hoping. But I'm in my 70s.
One of the candidates who wins next year is going to be a second-term president. It's just unclear which one. One of them will have the opportunity.